also works with chefs to design dining experiences that can supercharge the senses. So does he think food can stimulate feelings of love?
Absolutely, I think, by various means as well. Probably my favourite has to be called misplaced arousal, is perhaps the best way to describe it. What I always used to use as my technique of seduction, which is sort of feeding the young ladies of my acquaintance extremely hot, spicy curries, pasta arrabbiatas, tigerine curries, that kind of thing. Intuitively at first, but I think what was happening there is that these very hot curries would induce feelings of heat, of fluster, of pupil dilation in my guests. There was a good chance that they would misattribute those bodily sensations, or, you know, wow, this guy is so good looking, look at the way he makes me feel. You don't need food to do it. There's been lots of sort of research in the social psychology on proposing to people on wobbly rope bridges or in scary cinema movies. In all those cases, people are likely to be more aroused than normal. And in all those cases, that arousal gets misattributed to the person who's doing the asking.
Charles told me there's also been research carried out into the truth behind feelings. Drinking can immediately or rate others as more attractive. And he says there's even been an experiment involving rats and oysters.
So there hasn't been that much research, scientific research, that is assessing the impact of oyster eating on human fecundity. Nevertheless, there are a couple of animal studies that give us a hint. One study, rats were fed a zinc supplement. Zinc is something you find both in semen and oysters, and that led to increased romantic activity, shall we say. And then in another study, rabbit bucks were documented to have an increased sperm count when they were fed some acids, which are again common to oysters and to semen. Just a little out there, but what there is hints that sober activity, shall we say, through oysters.
Professor Charles Spence from the University of Oxford. One thing we've not really touched on is other kinds of love. Love for your friends, love for your family. Last year, food scientist Tia Finney inspired our couple, Bruce and Tommy, how food and love are so intertwined in their relationships. We got together to share thoughts and they started their 10-minute perspective voice. Sky spoke first about her book, Table of Food.
I start with sort of saying it's a book about love more than it is a cookbook. It's obviously a recipe book, but the premise of the book is that every time you cook for someone, it is an expression in some way or another of love. So whether that's a romantic kind of love, or unconditional love, perhaps for children, or friendship, self-love, and we explore what food through that. Ultimately, for someone is an act of caring, even if it's as simple as making a cup of tea. Why does it feel so special? It's not because you're a cup of tea when you're feeling a bit down or something. It's just the tea you make when you're feeling some tea, but there's something about preparing for someone and being prepared for that is a very special feeling.
So Claire, I suppose it's the same question to you. I mean, tell me all about your book.
So my book is, it's an exploration of food and using kind of my lives through but interviewing lots of people along the way. So I interviewed Diane Henry about food and divorce and about food and motherhood. I interviewed Lee Wilson about sugar and the use of sugar to show love and the complications that come with that. So it was a really lovely way of amassing all these different perspectives and different stories into one hopefully cohesive narrative.
We talk about meals having the power to forge relationships and bring people closer together. Do these meals have to be glamorous?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I've been interviewing chefs about the kind of meals that are definitive for their romantic relationships for a piece for Valentine's Day, and not one has chosen a food that is remotely complicated. Most of them are homely meals, most of them are comfort foods. It's nice to create a sense of ceremony, because that in itself makes the meal special, like the lighting of the candles and the setting of the table, but I don't think the food itself has to be particularly fancy.
And Sky, this brings us, I suppose, to your question about food and self-love. You've written a whole chapter of recipes designed for just one person. including desserts. Can I ask why you made that choice?
I find for me it's easy and intuitive to cook for others, and that gives a purpose to the meal, but so often when it's just me for supper, then I'll revert back to not really bothering to kind of have a proper meal. So I wanted to in some way explore these slightly more complicated emotions around food, and also offer some inspiration for getting into the habit of cooking for ourselves and taking care of ourselves. So there's not a sort of hierarchy of meals, but it still needs to be practical. I love the romantic idea of supper. For me, I want to take the time, but time is a precious resource, so probably don't want to take all day. So finding kind of practical dishes that I can really enjoy and feel special and have that ritual of a meal, but also that work well for one person and don't feel lonely, but feel appropriate and suited.
Claire, I mean, with your book, you did such a personal deep dive. What did you learn?
The way that love can be expressed through food is so diverse, and the more I looked and the more I had this lens in the world of food and love, I saw it everywhere. The way people show attention to detail and the consistency and the way they express themselves and their character. My boyfriend is quite a stickler for ratios, and that's such a sign of how measured he is as a man. Then you have somebody getting the ratio just right for a cup of tea, and I think you can really see it everywhere and in every meal if you look hard enough.
A perfect example, you said it earlier with a cup of tea. I mean, the act of giving someone a cup of tea when they're in distress, when they're at the height of joy, that act says 1,000 words.
This weekend, I visited my grandma, and she and my granddad used to have a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit in bed every morning. And she told me she still has it every morning. He passed away 4 years ago, and she still has a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit in bed, and it's her time with him. And she is religious about it, and she sometimes does feel guilty that she takes that time for herself even though he's not there, but he is there, really. In the act of her having a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit, he is there. And it's like, oh, so beautiful.
Claire Finney, author of Hungry Heart, and before her, the food writer Sky McAlpine. That's it for today. If this episode has inspired you to get cooking for someone you love, be it a romantic partner, someone in your family, a friend, or even yourself, do let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Our email address is thefoodprogram@bbc.co.uk, or you can join us on social media. We are at BBC Food Program.
The Food Programme was presented by Jacob Wise and produced in Bristol for BBC Audio by Natalie Donovan. Now the weather forecast. Here's Louise Lear.
Good morning all. It's probably perfect weather for having a cup of tea in bed. I think at the moment our first full week of February 2024 was a pretty eventful one, wasn't it? In fact, we had snow for some of us. It was fairly isolated, but it caused some disruption. But all of us had rain, and it did lead to some localised flooding in places as well. Pleased to say though, the weekend has been a little bit quieter, with some sunny spells coming through. You can almost sense that spring is just around the corner. Now, that quieter theme will continue into Monday. However, it will turn once again pretty unsettled through the middle part of the week. Pretty mild as well this time of year. So for the rest of the day today, it's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers. We have seen some rain across northeast England and eastern Scotland. That's just lingering on the extreme east coast, but it will gradually ease away. Sunny spells, a few isolated showers into the afternoon. Top temperatures between 6 and 11 degrees. Now overnight tonight we'll continue to see some clear skies and temperatures fall away. It'll be a chilly start to Monday morning, low single figures, and with 1 or 2 showers still dotted around in the northwest of Scotland in particular. Here there will be some icy stretches on the road. But Monday will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers once again. The showers most frequent in an area of low pressure in the far north and west, and temperatures still likely to be between 6 and 11 degrees. Now as we move into Tuesday, it will be a quiet start, but gradually clouding over from the southwest, and by the end of Tuesday we'll see more wetter weather developing in southwest England, Wales, gradually up into the Midlands by the end of the afternoon. Dry during the day across much of Scotland. That rain will sweep its way steadily northwards. More wet weather pushes in from the west on Wednesday, but wind direction swings from the southwesterly. Temperatures are likely to peak in central and southern England into the mid-teens. That's pretty mild for this time of year. Whatever you're doing, enjoy your week.
Life is weird.
and so is comedy.
The BBC has announced it intends to designate the English National Opera as a terrorist organisation.
The news, remixed into strange, satirical shapes.
Republicans in the US House of Representatives have selected a 16th century Peruvian mummy as their latest nominee for Speaker.
The broadcast regulator Ofcom has deployed the RAF and Royal Navy to prevent GBUs from escalating. The new series of the multi-award-winning Rescuer on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds starts this Wednesday night at 11:15.
On 92 to 95 FM, 198 long wave, on BBC Sounds and digital radio, this is BBC Radio 4.
Welcome to the world this weekend. This is James Naughton. War in Ukraine, the future of NATO, and the American election. Entangled.
They asked me that question. If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, no, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
Donald Trump turns up the heat. Joe Biden tries to get his aid package to Kyiv approved. In Eastern Europe, apprehension. The foreign minister of Poland.
If we allow Putin to conquer Ukraine, the price for deterring Putin will be much higher than the price of supporting Ukraine now.
And a notable anniversary in blue. A 100 years since George Gershwin played Rhapsody in Blue. We'll celebrate. The BBC News comes from Alan Smith.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted he'll go ahead with the assault on Rafah in southern Gaza, despite international concern about the safety of civilians sheltering there. Hamas has said the offensive would, in its words, blow up hostage negotiations. Israel's military is drawing up plans to help people flee the city, but the United Nations has warned there's nowhere safe for them to go. Our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher reports from Jerusalem.
Benjamin Netanyahu has dug in on his war plans for Rafah. We are going to do it, he said in an American TV interview. We are going to get the last remaining Hamas battalions in the city. He tried to reassure allies that this would not harm the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who've taken refuge there, obeying earlier Israeli orders. He said there would be an evacuation plan. But the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has said he's deeply concerned about their safety, as have others, including the Americans. The UN's humanitarian coordinator for Gaza told the BBC that the agency's emergency response is already under pressure and that displaced Palestinians have nowhere left to go.
Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski says that Donald Trump went too far when he suggested some NATO members don't deserve to be protected by the US because they spend too little on defense. But Mr. Sikorski said the former president deserved some credit for getting allies to increase their military budgets. The White House called Mr. Trump's remarks unhinged. The Housing Secretary Michael Gove has promised that no-fault evictions will be banned in England before the next general election. Ministers have repeatedly delayed legislation to fulfil their pledge to outlaw what are known as Section 21 evictions. Here's our political correspondent, Tony Bonsignori.
The latest figures show that more than 30,000 Section 21 notices were served on tenants in 2023, up more than a quarter on the previous year. There's broad agreement across the political spectrum that they should be banned. The Conservatives promised to do so in their 2019 manifesto, but the legislation has been delayed again and again. And last year the government said the abolition wouldn't come in until changes were made to the court system. Speaking to the BBC's Laura Koonsberg, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove today insisted that by the time of the next election, the government will have outlawed it and put the money into the courts in order to ensure that they can enforce it. Labour, though, is accusing the government of weasel words and indefinitely delaying keeping their promises to renters.
The Home Office says 124 migrants crossed the Channel in 3 boats yesterday. Just over 1,500 people have arrived in the UK so far this year, a drop of more than a quarter on the same period in 2023. The final results have been declared in the parliamentary election held in Pakistan on Thursday. Courts across the country have been flooded with legal challenges. Supporters of the jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan saying there has been vote rigging, a claim denied by the authorities. Here's our Pakistan correspondent, Caroline Davis.
Of 101 seats won by independent candidates in the election, BBC analysis suggests that 93 are backed by Imran Khan's party. That puts them well ahead of Nawaz Sharif's PMLN, who won 75. There are still questions about who will form Pakistan's next government. Mr Khan's PTI party have called for protests across Punjab, including in Rawalpindi and Lahore. Many of their candidates that did not win their seats have lodged legal challenges in the courts to try to get them overturned. Bilal Bhutto from the PPP, which received the third largest number of votes, has said that they have not had any formal discussions with Imran Khan's PTI or Nawaz Sharif's PMLN.
The Body Shop is set to appoint administrators in the UK this week. It's understood that trading over Christmas and into the new year wasn't as strong as hoped. The restructuring of the business is likely to result in job losses and the closure of stores. That's more than 200 branches are closing.
Thank you, Alan. The future of the war in Ukraine may hang on a vote in the House of Representatives in Washington in the next few days. A bill that contains around $60 billion in American aid for the Ukrainian government. But it is bogged down in partisan wrangling. The bill also contains provisions for Gaza and Taiwan and President Biden's plan for improved security processing on the US border. It's a hugely controversial question. And of course, there is campaign rhetoric swirling everywhere. And this fiery contribution from Donald Trump yesterday.
They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You gotta pay. You gotta pay your bills.
Encouraging Vladimir Putin. In office, he was tough in demanding that NATO countries fulfill their financial obligations to the alliance, but as ever, Donald Trump takes us onto ground where no one else would dream of going. It is a striking illustration of how one of the world's rolling crises is entangled in the struggle between those two old war horses, Biden and Trump, or held hostage, as a Ukrainian government spokesman put it the other day. Governments across Europe are, of course, used to having to navigate Trump's skepticism about NATO, even his hostility. But he hasn't gone as far as this before, at least in public. I spoke this morning to Radek Sikorski, Foreign Minister of Poland.
We know that former President Trump has an inimitable style. He is right that not everybody in NATO is paying 2% of their GDP for their own defense. These are not NATO bills. These are expenditures for our own defense. UK and Poland actually are. We've gone to 3% of GDP on defense, and we are likely to go even beyond that. But we are obviously concerned by the implications of questioning Article 5 of the NATO treaty, because that's not a contract. You know, we were there for the United States with Article 5 when the US was attacked on 9/11, and we went to Afghanistan, and we didn't present any bills for that operation.
It's always difficult for ministers and leaders outside the country to intervene in an election debate. But I imagine you feel that it's really important to make your feelings known in this matter. Because if you have somebody who could be the President of the United States again by the end of this year, talking about encouraging the Russians to invade a NATO ally, that takes us onto new ground, doesn't it?
We want to have the best possible relations with whoever is in charge in Washington. The most urgent matter at hand is, of course, the package of support for Ukraine, on which the majority of Republican lawmakers, I understand, is in favor, and we hope it passes. American assistance is crucial because it's more weighed towards the defense end of the spectrum. America has the best arms.
In your judgment about where the war in Ukraine now stands, how important is it not simply to provide military assistance and money, but to keep the commitment to Ukraine's side of the argument strong and united?
The war is at a stalemate. at the front line. It's important to stay the course because Putin has augmented his production of ammunition. We are doing the same, but not fast enough. And if we allow Putin to conquer Ukraine, he will do to all of Ukraine what he did to Donbass, which is to use the human and industrial resources of a province to then go further. And then the price for deterring Putin will be much higher than the price of supporting Ukraine now.
And anyone who doubts what Putin's view of Russian Europe is would only have to watch now slightly infamous interview with Tucker Carlson to get a very clear picture.
Well, it's an odd interview full of historical revisionism and blatant lies too. If President Putin wants to go back to the 13th century or the 17th century, does he really want to go back to the borders of Russia of those times? And I hope he doesn't persuade anybody in the United States, because I don't think Americans want the map of North America to go back to the 17th century.
Radek-Sikorski, the Polish Foreign Minister. In the months campaigning ahead, Trump will continue both to encourage and echo the dominant faction of the Republican Party, shaped in his image as carrying him towards the presidential nomination, despite all the clouds of legal nightmares that he trails in his way. The writer and lifelong Republican David Frum of The Atlantic describes the change this revolution has brought.
Donald Trump has long admired Russia and Russia's dictator Vladimir Putin. He's long disliked and distrusted the United States. He tried impeach at his first impeachment because he tried to blackmail Ukraine to fabricate material against his likely opponent, the Biden, and threatened with a military aid to Ukraine unless Ukraine cooperated. So his animus, his affinity for Russia's animus against Ukraine, those are notorious facts. There's a lot of debate about why, what is the motive, but the results there's no representative. Trump's own party, especially the Senate, has been more blatant and more aligned with traditional American policy of supporting embattled democracies against aggressors. But as Trump has neared the nomination, his party has pivoted and fabricated a series of excuses. So everything you're seeing, all the complexity, it's not that this is what is really going on. This is people trying to find some way to explain what is really going on that will obscure the truth of what's really going on. Which is Donald Trump admires Putin in Russia, dislikes Ukraine, and wants aid to Ukraine stop.
Do you think in the end they will approve the package in the House? You know the Senate bill is heading there.
You know, I would doubt it. I said yes. Are they shaking? Because what you see is people, and I think about this in the time, people I personally know, and for speak other people need to aid Ukraine. I've seen how they vote the other way. That's what I vote. And that fear is so much greater than their integrity, or at least has been until now, that I worry now that they need it legally. The United States may be about to do one of the most contemptible acts in American history and stop the aid to Ukraine and deliver this war to Russia.
But although Trump is being fiercely criticised by some who served in the White House, former cabinet members of defense, foreign affairs and intelligence among them, he has loyalists like Victoria Coates, his former Deputy National Security Advisor. She is now a senior research fellow at the Right-Wing Heritage Foundation. And she argued to me that Biden's strategy of wrapping up a number of funding requests in one bill has stirred up his opponents unnecessarily more than would otherwise be the case.
He has not presented a strategy for Ukraine, and he has stuffed all of his funding requests into so-called emergency supplementals. And I don't want to get weedy about the budgeting, but that means that he doesn't have to pay for it. He's just saddling American taxpayers with more debt, just printing the money to pay for it. And so I think you find a lot of Republicans saying, okay, we don't want, I wouldn't characterize it as a relaxed approach to that. But at the same time, 2 years into this war, why aren't you budgeting this normally? How can you call it an emergency?
Well, you say that some of these people don't want Putin to win. On the other hand, if you listen to one of Donald Trump's speeches on the campaign trail, there's absolutely no question that he's got no interest in helping Ukraine defeat Putin. It's perfectly straightforward about it. And that's a change in American policy which has lasted for about 70 years.
Well, the fact of the matter is, of the last three presidencies, the one presidency in which Putin did not take aggressive action toward Eastern Europe was under President Trump. That's just a fact. And I think, if you look at the transcript of Secretary General Stoltenberg's visit to Heritage week before last, he actually credited President Trump with strengthening NATO by insisting that NATO allies increase their defense spending, which he also did at the 2019 NATO summit.
Do you think in the end, the House, where the Republican side is divided on this, will approve $60 billion to Ukraine?
I don't know. I think if they isolated the military aid, so if they cut it down to maybe $40 billion and submitted it as a standalone bill rather than stuffed into an emergency supplemental with an offset, I think it would pass very easily. I think there are a lot of people who want to do something like that for Ukraine. They think it's in our best interests. But when you are going to try to stuff it into, as I said, a broader security bill that does not include the border, you're going to have a problem. And the White House knows that, but they're doing it anyways. It's a cynical political ploy.
Well, it's also cynical for some Republicans who've been shouting for action on the border to say we don't want to do it now because it would help Biden in an election year.
No, I think what was in the original sort of overall supplemental that was stripped out by the Senate was hardly a border security measure. That was to pay a whole bunch of new people to process more people coming across and to codify catch and release into law, and a whole lot of other little tricks and gimmicks that do not add up to a secure southern border, which is not what the president wants.
How do you react finally to what a senior Ukrainian official said the other day, which was that he regretted the war in which that country is fighting for its existence?
Political support in the United States, but instead he's decided to make it a partisan issue.
Victoria Coates. Well, this is the most partisan House of Representatives on Capitol Hill that anyone can remember, with the Republican narrow majority divided and their leader, the Speaker Mike Johnson, seemingly unable to exercise authority in his own party. The consequence is legislative turmoil almost daily. Congresswoman Betty McCollum is a senior Democrat. Her district is in Minnesota, and from her you get a picture of the party battle over Putin in Ukraine, which is a kind of emblem of the divided politics of the moment.
I can't explain people making terrible decisions. I can't legislate for or against somebody's stupidity. To take Putin at his word, now he's talking about, wanting to settle and have a truce, a treaty, and for them to say that, we need to follow Putin's advice is just beyond the pale. There's a small minority of them, but they seem to be able to control the Speaker of the House, and that's why I'm so pleased that the Senate this weekend is moving forward with a Ukraine-Taiwan security bill. It also includes aid for Gaza, and I believe the Senate will send us a good bill over to the House. In the House of Representatives, the overwhelming majority of us are ready to take that bill up and vote for it.
Of course, the rhetoric on this subject has been whipped up by Donald Trump in his campaign for the nomination, and he hopes for the presidency. And he's making it pretty clear that he wants to persuade as many Americans as he can that the days of feeling an obligation to, for example, defend Europe are past. How do you think people as a whole will react to that message in the course of the next few months?
This is about democracy, and the democracies have come together to say to the autocrats, the bullies of the world, this is not how we choose to live our lives. We choose to live our lives under a set of international norms, laws with freedom, dignity, and respect. And then I say after that, if we allow Putin to keep his aggression, Romania, the Baltics, Poland, possibly next, we have compacts with them. We do not need to have our soldiers, other European soldiers putting their lives on the line when Ukraine is more than prepared to do the fight if they have the equipment that they need to push back this Russian aggression. And then, quite frankly, the other thing I said, do you think Putin's going to stop there? He is building his military strength up around the Arctic Ocean. This is something that, you know, people might just think Putin's aggressions in Europe. It's also right off our coast of Alaska. We need to take this seriously, and I'm so proud that the democracies are standing together. You folks have been great allies. The European Union stood up with $50 billion. The democracies are united, and I'm proud to be part of that unification.
And there is yet another complication: Joe Biden's age. Republicans are mocking him daily for sometimes looking and sounding like an 81-year-old man, muddling the presidents of Mexico and Egypt the other day, for example. Even as Donald Trump is stumbling through speeches and getting things wrong himself, like making Viktor Orban the president of Hungary. But the president's age is undoubtedly on people's minds. Hillary Clinton herself, who lost to Trump in 2016, said yesterday that his age was a legitimate issue. This was the president addressing the matter on Thursday.
My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
I asked Betty McCollum, a Biden loyalist, to respond.
It makes him totally human, and he doesn't lie the way former President Trump does. But I can share this with you, James. I was with President Biden just a couple of days ago for an hour and a half, and he was speaking off the cuff. He was, you know, hitting his points that were prepared, and he took questions, and he didn't miss a beat. Is he a little awkward when he talks sometimes? Sure, we all are, and that just makes him human, and I can't control what Fox News does, but I know my president's not a liar.
Away from Capitol Hill, of course, the pollsters can all agree that there's one feeling that's widespread across the country, that the choice is one that many voters regret. He has a big car on the outskirts of Phoenix, now a vast city spreading into the Arizona desert. Not a rabid partisan for either candidate, just a citizen who's interested in good government.
Trump is the only candidate the Republicans could run that Biden can beat. Biden's the only nominee that the Democrats can run that Trump can beat. If either side ran anybody else, the other one would have no chance. So it's really a unique situation because, you know, as much as there's going to be all the rhetoric and everything else, they actually ought to be very thankful because they're running against the only other person that they would have a chance to actually win. We're in a situation, there's so much distrust between the parties that it has created really paralysis in our congressional body. And that means we do nothing. We get nothing accomplished, and it's just tragic.
It's an attitude you can hear expressed by voters old and young across America. But the two candidates who are slugging it out are surely likely to be circling each other in the ring still come November. It's a long road to that point, but some of the challenges they'll have to surmount along the way are already obvious. I asked David Frum to look at it from the point of view of the challenger, Donald Trump.
I understand the Republican strategy for winning the presidency in 2024. Donald Trump cannot get more than 46% of the vote. He lost the popular vote by 3 million votes to Hillary Clinton in 2016. He lost the popular vote by 7 million votes to Biden in 2020. If you look at all the presidents or all the candidates for president who have run for office in the 21st century, Donald Trump got a smaller share of the vote both times than Al Gore, who lost, than Mitt Romney, who lost, and John Kerry, who lost. He's not a very popular figure. He's got an intense base of loyalty, and he's got a wider number of Republicans who will put up with him, but he's stuck at 46% of the vote. So how do you get to be president? Well, the Electoral College will help you, but only if you can narrow the gap somewhat. So he has to find some way to shave Biden's 15-point-something to the 48-point-something that Hillary Clinton got before the Electoral College can work its magic for him. So the goal of this campaign is just to shave. It's like Parma ham or delicatessen bologna. He doesn't need to change his dynamic. He just needs to shave little bits off the Biden majority. He needs to stand up some third-party candidates, and those people are getting a lot of Republican money. He has to sow some doubts in the weak part of the Biden coalition. He's playing for inches. And if he can just knock an inch or two off Biden's support, then maybe his 46% can convert through the Electoral College into the presidency again. I do believe that we have seen demonstrated again and again that the anti-Trump majority in America is bigger than the pro-Trump minority. We saw that in the elections of 2016, where he lost by 3 million votes, 2018, where he lost the House in huge turnout, 2020, he lost the presidency again by a bigger margin. And in 2021, he lost the Senate. In 2022, his party had a very bad midterm result. So you can see the Biden majority at work, but it is much more disunited than the pro-Trump minority. So if you can weaken it, that's the hope Trump has.
David Frum of The Atlantic on aging candidates and an election that will produce, we can be sure, even more melodrama. To a different era now, far away from our contemporary wars and disputes, the Jazz Age, the Roaring Twenties, and George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which had its premiere in New York 100 years ago tomorrow. The young Gershwin was commissioned to write a piece for Paul Whiteman and his jazz orchestra, and he turned it out very quickly, describing it as a kaleidoscope of America, trying to catch it. It's metropolitan madness in the spirit of that heady time. Igor Stravinsky himself was in the first night audience, the composer who'd shocked the classical world a decade before with his Rite of Spring. And Gershwin was also talking about a new age in a different voice. I've been speaking to the pianist, Julian Joseph.